receive information and follow it up. I'm sure there will be a lot of information which it takes time to actually to gather and to be able to understand. So without further ado, let me to introduce our first speaker, who is Andrew Thomas from London, United Kingdom. And he is the president of the International Hearing Loops Manufacturers Association. And Andrew's association is actually collaborating today with us for this webinar and the future the webinars we will be doing, including also another guest who I will later introduce. So Andrew, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Lydia, and good afternoon from London. Hopefully we'll go through this afternoon with some information that will be useful to everyone who's in attendance. So as Lydia said, that without further ado, let's get going. This is myself, Andrew Thomas. I'm Market Development Director of a company called Contactor, who are a assistive listening systems manufacturer. It's a family business which was started in 1970. I'm also, as Lydia said, the chairman of EFHOH, which is the Hearing Loop Manufacturers Association, and I am a BSI committee member, which sits on BS 559 committee, and that's responsible for the British standard BS 8300. It's some years ago that I realized that some of the products that we were providing as a manufacturer weren't always providing the benefit to the end user that they were intended for. So that started myself on a journey, really working with a number of charities, particularly in the UK and the USA, working with end users, people with hearing loss, to understand what they needed to access good working assistive listening systems. And that's where I've made my speciality, I suppose, as opposed to the technical side. I come much more from the practical side of ensuring that the products are available and working when people want to use them. So we're going to look today in this session. I'm going to cover hearing loops, infrared systems, radio frequency, Wi-Fi technologies, albeit very briefly. And my colleagues on the panel today will also be talking about Auracast above that. That's something I'm sure everyone wants to hear about. Next slide, please, Daria. So quite a basic question. Why do people need assistive listening systems? Hearing loss comes in many shapes and forms, and as we get older, a lot of us struggle in certain situations, but we all know what it's like to struggle in, I think, what's called the restaurant or the cafe situation, where there's background noise that is difficult to filter out the sounds we don't want to hear. So assistive listening systems really help individuals focus on the sound they want to hear, and this is particularly relevant for assistive listening systems in public places. So it's not about personal devices. This is much more about how we get to the sound we want to in areas where there's lots of background noise, and it's assist you in hearing what you want to hear. Next slide, please. Now, I'm sure the audiologists on the panel will be able to give a much better overview of hearing aids themselves, but from my understanding, there's a number of hearing aids that you can get that are available. There is obviously a drive to make them smaller. More technology is always being pushed for hearing aids. They're becoming more in tune with users' needs. And there's obviously things like over-the-counter hearing aids coming along. So I know that this is quite an important subject, which I'm sure will be touched on later on in the session today. Next slide, please. What's I think very important about assistive listening systems is that a lot of equipment that's out there is being driven to be installed by standards and legislation. Some of this is a positive thing. Some of it is not so much a positive thing because it gets some organizations sometimes just to tick a box and provide something they believe is appropriate for the end user, when in fact it's not the case. So it's an area that's a very important part of getting the right equipment into the right environment for the end users. And this is something I've learned, particularly with my involvement into the British standards. And I know one of my colleagues on the panel, Brian Copsey, has a very in-depth knowledge of standards and how they're used to assist people with assistive listening, etc. So very important part of getting the right equipment in the right environment going forward. It's interesting, I think, from the perspective of the panel I sit on, the British Standards BS 559, which is about the access in the built environment. So it covers a whole range of accessibility questions. I'm there as an advisor on assistive listening, and I think it's worth reminding people how these standards have evolved. They haven't just happened overnight. They've evolved over a number of years. And when you look at some of the assistive listening technologies that are out there, particularly with hearing loops, it's a technology that has gone from being a one-to-many assistive listening solution, a technology, to cover areas where it can be used in one-to-one counter situations, in help points, in lifts, elevators in the US, in emergency evacuation points. There's a whole range of different areas where hearing loop technology is used and benefits the end user. So I think it's important to make that point, and that technologies that are coming down the line need to be able to fulfill a whole range of different applications before they can be deemed to be a replacement for hearing loops, for example. So it highlights the point that I think we've made about technologies having to learn to work together for the benefit of the end user. So that's a really important point, I think, in that respect. Next slide, please. So we're just going over those the available assistive listening technologies that we're going to be talking about. So that's hearing loop, infrared, radio frequency, Wi-Fi, and the Auracast one, which is being spoken about later on. So I think we can jump to the next slide after that as well. We're going to go straight into hearing loop technology. I know we're very tight for time as well. Hearing loops are, people call them an old technology. I was reminded the other day that the wheel is an old technology, but we haven't found a suitable replacement yet for that. So hearing loops have been around for some time, but they're installed in literally millions of locations throughout the world. And it's interesting when you look at the UK as an example. We touched on hearing aids earlier, how we get the receivers, if you like, the hearing aids with telecoils in them into the population in the UK. We have them through the National Health Service. So if someone has a hearing issue, they go to the doctor, they get referred to the audiologist at the National Health Service, and in time they will get a hearing aid. Now that hearing aid will come with normally a telecoil. Whether or not that's activated is another question. But there are, I believe, still in the UK, about 80% of hearing aids that are dispensed through the National Health Service. And the majority of those have a telecoil in them. So as you would expect, the assistive listening system solution that goes with that, hearing loops, is very widely used in the UK. Again, looking at areas like Scandinavia, and I'm sure Alf will provide more information if needed on this. It's another area where historically hearing loops have been widely used. And as time has gone on, and it's been seen as a solution for accessibility for people with hearing loss, other countries around the world have included hearing loop technology in their my mind's gone blank. Sorry, in their law side of things. They've also, when you look at the United States, it's interesting how hearing loop technology has grown over there, mainly through the advocacy route. Pockets of hearing loop installations have grown over the US in the many recent years. So it's an existing highway of assistive listening that's already in use around the world. Next slide, please. So that's a rough drawing of a hearing aid, just giving an idea of what it's about. And there's the telecoil that would go inside the hearing aid, and I know that it does take up a bit of space. Again, looking at how people use hearing aids and how people access the technology. What's the beauty of hearing loops is the fact that people can actually press a button on the device and get sound directly to the hearing aid. There is no need for an assistant, if you like, to be used to get access to the hearing loops. Next slide, please. How are we doing for time? Not bad. Okay. So just a rough sketch there of how a hearing loop works, if you like. There's a sound source that comes from an audio source primarily, and in this instance, it's a microphone that goes through a hearing loop driver or amplifier, which is connected to a physical loop of wire that would go around an area. So when loop systems first came along, they were primarily used with a wire that went round an area, a room, that just went around the perimeter of the room. And it was quite basic in that respect, and there were issues probably around that way that the systems were installed. And over time, the technology has changed. There are now different ways of providing the sound, so it's kept within a certain area, which is called a phased array loop system. The problem with the perimeter loop is that you'd get a signal outside of a room as well as inside. So for instances like courtrooms, you wouldn't have used a loop system because of the prospect of overhearing. So anyone that in theory would see the sign sits within the area of the loop and picks up the signal. And the same goes for the smaller one-to-one loop systems. They are discrete now. People see a sign, they walk up to a counter, for example, they see the sign, switch the hearing aid to T, and they get the benefit of the sound directly to the hearing aid. And I think it's worth noting that the challenges around hearing loss and the fact it's a hidden disability, not everyone wants it to be known that they have a hearing loss. Quite often, you see people with a disability that's not hidden. It's you can see it with hearing loss. It's a hidden disability, and it's much more of a, I think, a challenge for people to be open about some of their disabilities in that respect. So it's an interesting subject which has and continues to be challenging in that respect. Next slide, please. And as I mentioned earlier there, some of the benefits of a loop system is that users don't draw attention to themselves. It's easy access for the user. Now with the way that the systems are installed, working with service providers and installers to ensure cables are hidden is much more easier to do. It's the only universally accepted standard-backed technology that's got an IEC standard behind it that makes it compatible with telecoil hearing aids. And it's important that I think when we're looking at new technologies that are coming down the line, that standards are in place to ensure that everything's considered when it comes to delivery of assistive listening technologies. Another important point is about the sound latency. So latency is the difference between the sound being transmitted and the time it gets to be picked up. There are fairly strict rules on what that should look like or sound like. Hearing loops, you don't have an issue with latency. It literally gets to the hearing aid or the listening device without any latency. Next slide, please. So with other technologies, there are some challenges around the technology. Electrical interference can be an issue, which manifests itself in the hearing aid as a hum. And I think it's worth just noting that when people who use the technology experience something wrong with a loop system, for example, when they try to use it and it doesn't work as they expect, they don't say, oh, my hearing aid's picking up a hum because it's getting some electrical interference, or they don't say because there's no signal, someone switched it off, or I'm not standing in the right place. They just say it's not working. So I think it's worth sharing those kind of thoughts about the people's experiences, because it's something that needs to be considered with whatever technology is managing people's expectations. And quite often, I think from the technical perspective, it can be seen as, oh, well, it's this problem or that problem. From the user perspective, it doesn't work for them when they want to need it, which is the important part for them. That's what we need to focus on, is getting it right as early as we can to make sure people have access to the sound they want to hear at the time they want to hear it. So let's go on to the next technology, and I can see that time's ticking away. So infrared sounds transmitted from a source, similar to what was described as the loop system, and that goes to an infrared transmitter with a modulator that sends a signal wirelessly into an area flooded with invisible infrared light to a compatible receiver worn by a user. That in itself, I think, it shows the difference between a hearing loop where the sound goes directly to the hearing aid, where with an infrared system, someone has to go and ask to use the device so that they're given a receiver. You know, as an example, you could use a theatre, or as we mentioned, a courtroom earlier, which brings up its own issues. And excuse me, I just noticed a typo there on that next point, but sound is delivered from personal receivers to the ear via a headset or to the hearing instrument telecoil via a personal inductive neck loop. So you can transmit into a telecoil by plugging a neck loop into an infrared receiver. And what's beneficial about an infrared system, it keeps the sound within a particular area, but you have to have line of sight to get the signal. Next slide, please. I'm not going to go through all of those benefits as time is pushing on. I think they're all fairly clear. And might as well go to the next slide, please. So there's just some considerations just to look at. Receivers have to be maintained. There must be a line of sight. Service providers need to retrieve and maintain the receivers. There's hygiene concerns, and it does get interfered with by strong sunlight. Next slide, please. We'll whiz through these ones. So similarly to infrared, the FM radio equipment needs to be used with receivers. People have to ask for them. Often FM systems are used with tour guide systems, and again they can be used with telecalls via a personal inductive neck loop. Next slide, please. It can be used in a wide range of situations, very simple to install, and can be used outside in direct sunlight, unlike infrared systems. If we go to the next slide, and these are some of the negative points around FM systems. Again, quite a few there that would put some barriers up for people using assistive listening. Now, I think my time is up. There's a few slides on Wi-Fi. So is it okay? I think if just to quickly go through those, I won't talk through those. Maybe Freya, you can just go through those and have maybe 10, 15 seconds on each slide.
Yes, please.
Just pop through those. I think it's just, as you're popping through those, Freya, it's just worth saying that Wi-Fi was a technology that was going to be the end of the telecoil some maybe 10 years ago. It never quite hit the heights it was going to, as the marketing people in those companies that were making it were promising, but it does a job in certain applications. So I think that might be the last but one slide. There we go. And that should be me over. Sorry to try and put so much information through in one go, but hopefully it got the message across.
Thank you very much, Andrew, for this comprehensive overview of what exists currently now, which I think has been very useful, and we had lots of actually comments in there. So you may drop into the chat and respond to some comments which were directly to you, and I actually said that you will respond to it. And in full excitement, I of course forgot to introduce myself as the president of the European Federation of Hard of Hearing People and the whole team we have today who is supporting this event. Now, our next speaker is someone who is coming from my home country, my birth country, which is Poland. Poland is a late entrant to the assistive listening systems in general. And Michalina, Adamska, who is from Culture Without Barriers, will present what type of work they have done so far, how Poland has coded up actually quite very well when it comes to assistive listening systems experience for hard of hearing people in Poland. So Michalina, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Lydia. Could you just confirm if my slides are visible already?
Yes.
All right. Thank you, and hello everyone. I'm very happy to be speaking to you today. As Lydia said, my name is Michalina Adamska, and I work for the Culture Without Barriers Foundation, which is located in Warsaw, Poland. And today I will talk to you about how our foundation has been advocating for the use of hearing loops across Poland and what we have been doing in order to promote this accessibility solution. So first, just to give you some context, I will introduce my NGO to you. Culture Without Barriers Foundation has existed for 12 years now, and it was created with the main goal of providing accessibility of culture, of cultural events and different types of materials. So what we do is we provide sign language interpreting, we provide hearing loops, subtitles, audio descriptions, and many other solutions. We also provide trainings on accessibility, and we ourselves are also an event organizer. And during all of our events, we have been trying to provide hearing loops for people who might need them. And that's how we learned, by talking to people who would participate in our events, that hearing loops were not popular and used in Poland at all. Hard of hearing people who would participate in our events would tell us that basically our events were the only place where they could actually use a hearing loop, because in other places, hearing loops were either not accessible, not available, or they existed, but the sound quality was so poor that they weren't able to use them. And they also told us that they don't really know where to search for information about where hearing loops are available. They don't know how to find that information and learn if a particular institution had a hearing loop or not. And that's how we came up, the president of our foundation came up with the idea to create a website which would serve as a database to collect information about hearing loops all over Poland. The project to create this database is called Tu Możesz, which in English translates into "here you can," meaning here you can fully participate, you can fully communicate. We received a grant to develop this website, and so we started the work by conducting UX tests and talking to hard of hearing people, to users of hearing aids, of hearing implants, to audiologists and accessibility coordinators. And during this preliminary stage of developing this website, we once again confirmed that hearing loops are not really popular and used in Poland. Hard of hearing people told us that either they have never heard about such a solution, or they heard of it, but whenever they tried to use a hearing loop, the sound quality was so poor that it wasn't effective for them at all, so they got discouraged. Then, when we talked to representatives of different institutions, we learned that employees very often lacked knowledge about hearing loops on a very basic level, to an extent that very often they would unplug the hearing loop from the power outlet because for some reason it wasn't convenient for them. And so, of course, the hearing loop wouldn't work properly. And then finally, when we talked to audiologists, we learned that many of them do not even inform their patients that such a solution exists, or they do not activate the coil in hearing aids because they assume that since hearing aids are so unpopular in Poland and there are so few of them, it's of no use to inform patients that such a solution exists. So we were sort of in this vicious circle of people lacking knowledge about hearing loops and therefore not using them and not implementing them in their buildings. And so basing on all this information, we developed our website, which is now the biggest database in Poland, in which you can search for places equipped with hearing loops. So the functionalities of the websites are, first of all, a search engine in which you can search for places that provide a hearing loop, or you can check if the institution that you want to go to has a hearing loop or not. If you represent an institution, you can inform us that you own a hearing loop, and then we can enter it into our database. If you are a user, you can also tell us that a hearing loop in some place or another doesn't work properly, and then we will try to contact the institution and solve this issue. Additionally, this website also serves as a calendar of accessible events. So we are collecting information about events all over Poland that are provided with hearing loops, but also subtitles or supertitles, sign language interpreting, and other solutions that might be useful for people with hearing loss. Here I will just briefly introduce to you the core team of this project, because in fact, almost all of our team of our foundation is involved in it in one part or the other, but the core was really 3 people, so I would like to acknowledge them now. So there is Anna, who is the president of our foundation, who was the originator of this entire idea, who decided to create a website in order to address the needs of hard of hearing people that were still unmet. Then there is Alexandra. Alexandra is now the coordinator and the leader of the project. She is also a hearing aid user, so she acts as a self-advocate. And finally, there is Dariusz, who is our expert technician. He installs, assembles hearing loops, so he is the one responsible for all technical matters. Here I'm just showing a slide with some statistics of our website. I will not talk through them in detail, but let me just tell you that this slide presents the numbers of places equipped with induction loops in total, and events accessible to people with hearing disabilities that were available on our website in the years 2022, 2023, and 2024. And the numbers between 2022 and 2024 have almost doubled in all of those cases. So this really shows us that this website is being used. The numbers keep growing very fast, and people, both users and institutions, are actively using this website in order to inform about the solutions that they provide or look for information. Finally, let me describe you our actions that we keep undertaking in order to promote hearing loop in Poland. First of all, we keep educating ourselves all the time. So we keep talking to hard of hearing people, to the users or potential users of hearing loops. We keep talking to audiologists, to accessibility coordinators, in order to make sure that our knowledge that we have is up to date, and also to keep up with all the technological advancements in the area. And for instance, one topic that we are discussing about now is that it seems that in Poland, hard of hearing people do not really use one-to-one hearing loops, for example, at checkout counters. So we will be trying to investigate why it is the case. Then we educate institutions. We do it in several ways. First of all, for 5 years now already in Poland, we have had an act on accessibility that has obliged institutions in Poland to provide a hearing loop in their building. So that means that more and more public institutions have been installing hearing loops in their buildings. And so if my foundation installs a hearing loop in some building, in some institution, we always provide a training for the employees, so that they don't only get the device itself, but they also gain knowledge about what the solution is, who it is for, what to do, what not to do in order for the loop to function properly. We also encourage institutions to enter their data into our database, so inform us if they have a hearing loop in their building or if they organize some accessible event. Finally, we also educate users or potential users of hearing loops, and we do it in several ways. First of all, if some hard of hearing person or deaf person comes to our event, we just talk to them directly and explain what hearing loops are, because still not all of people with hearing loss in Poland have a knowledge of what a hearing loop is. So we try to close this gap. Then we also encourage users to use our website to search for places providing a hearing loop or for search for events that will be accessible for them, as well as to inform us if they find some hearing loop that is not functioning properly. So this is what we can do locally, and on a higher level, let's say, in order to reach people all across Poland. We have been publishing interviews online, interviews mostly with hard of hearing people. And these interviews cover many different topics, but somehow the topic of hearing loops is always present in one way or another. So when people share those interviews over social media, which is happening a lot, this is also a way for us to reach people in other cities, which normally wouldn't be possible for us. And this is all that I have prepared for today. I will be happy to answer any questions if you have some. And that's it. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Michalina, for your presentation and how the use of hearing loops, and especially existence of hearing loops, has quite rapidly expanded in Poland, which is a great news, and it's important that the access is there. Now, our next speaker is Brian Copsey, who is a consultant at International Telecommunication Union and few of our institutions and standardization organizations. So I'm not going to name them all because he's actually, in around a lot of different places, but he's very knowledgeable. And he comes from United Kingdom. So Brian, the floor is yours. Brian, we can't hear you. You are muted.
My apologies.
Perfect. Yes, we can hear you.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for the invitation to speak. My name is Brian Copsey, as stated. I run my own company called Copsey Communications Consultants. My work is primarily in radio spectrum management, compatibility, standardization, and regulation. I work as a consultant to EHLMA, the European Hearing Instrument Manufacturers. I'm currently also working with the Bluetooth SIG on a range of interference and other issues. I would like to open a door which I'm sure most of you will not have looked behind before, as to the other aspects of the assistive listening device systems. We have a range of issues which need consideration. When we look at an assistive listening device that has a radio connection, we always presume that the medical directive regulations in Europe cover everything. Well, unfortunately, in some respects, they are the simpler part because they're well understood. The issues are on the radio aspects, and the group I chair in ETSI has been writing standards for assistive listening devices since 1990-ish. And we have also fought very hard against a range of the European Commission's activities to double test things like cochlear implants and also various forms of T-coil. Up until the last few years, radio started at 9 kilohertz. Therefore, cochlear implants, T-coils and other things were not required to conform to radio regulations. The Commission lawyers decided to tidy things up, and now it is 0 or below, and therefore all of these things come in place. The issues of these regulations are both practical and also cost. If you have to test a cochlear implant twice to the medical regulations and radio regulations, the cost becomes more zeros than you want to think about. And the same with T-coil in the way that the Commission wanted to test it. Working with Andrew's organization and with others, we now have standards for T-coil. We have the cochlear implants excluded as it was double testing. That took 5 years. So the manufacturers have a range of issues behind the door, which you wouldn't normally have to concern yourself with. Currently, we have a range of regulation in Europe, which is looking at a thing called Delegated Act for the radio regulations of Europe. And this is looking at the software aspects of devices, wanting them to be bug-proof, not hackable, and in the case of anything dealing with financial aspects, 100% secure. Anyone that has any experience with software will know that whatever you write today, a 6-year-old will crack tomorrow. So this has proved to be very, very difficult and is still ongoing. We also have an AI Act in process, which again, a hearing aid is considered under their definitions an AI device. And again, we are working very hard to minimize the impact on the industry, because we have to separate the reality from the legality. And the Commission wants legal certainty in everything. And I look forward to the day it decides to have legal certainty on weather forecasts. But however, we also are working within CPT, which is the administrations of Europe. And this again is working on spectrum issues, compatibility, and also things like receiver resilience. Recently, we have done a lot of work within CPT to minimize the impact on ALD systems, because again, from the point of view of the user, the system is usually working at a few meters, perhaps more if it's a wide-ranging system, but it certainly isn't out looking at miles of coverage. But the administrations led by France have generated a regulation now, which, if fully implemented, would increase the receiver resilience by 60 dB. For those, and that is radio dBs, not audio dBs. Again, the cost issues are quite horrendous, and also the gain to the end user would be 0, except that additional filtering and other things would increase the physical size and, of course, the battery consumption. So a lot of this radio issues are a problem for the design, maintenance, and users of the ALD type systems. I've also had some 20 plus years of radio interference work within the UK and act for a number of the manufacturers and organizations to assist and try and answer problems. We found a number of general issues. The other type of work that the manufacturers are having to achieve is, you may or may not recall, a few years ago, the mobile phone industry wanted to use frequencies in the 2.3 to 2.4 range. Just consider these as numbers for convenience. And of course, a lot of the assistive listening devices, Bluetooth, etc., are using 2.4 to 2.48. So we spent a lot of time carrying out testing, both in the UK and at the Joint Research Council in Europe, in order to look at the problem and also find some solutions. I'm glad to say that, touch wood, we haven't had, to my knowledge, any problems from that, since the work that we carried out appeared to solve the issues. The problems that we have also are that the standardization is now regarded as a legal aspect of the regulation rather than a technical document. And therefore it becomes more and more difficult to actually write standards which are both legally, with legal certainty, and are practical. So from that perspective, we have a problem. And one of the major issues that I've been involved in since the early 90s is a thing called education. The problem, again, is most of the administrators, European Commission, others, are not aware of hearing aids and their requirements, or even the fact that T-coil or other things exist. So that has been a major issue, and I'll come back to that at the end of the presentation. Since around 2010, the hearing aid industry, along with the audio industry, has been looking to have some form of universal broadcast system via the Bluetooth technology. Bluetooth to date has been a one-to-one type system. The idea of Auracast is one to many. The specifications and other things I have put together very briefly, and the Auracast offers a lot of possibilities. I would emphasize that it has only been in place roughly 9 months in the standard published by Bluetooth. And one of the issues which we have to be very careful of is that the Bluetooth requirements have a standard speech requirement, which is low-level speech, which can be picked up and used by assistive listening devices in their various forms. The audio industry, on the other hand, wants very high-quality systems for high-quality stereo and all the other wonderful things, which, of course, from the perspective of the hearing aid, are somewhat pointless and would increase battery life considerably, as well as probably the physical size of the device. So it's early days with Auracast, but there are a number of things which I believe we need to consider, because what the PR says and reality aren't always quite the same thing. My personal views, and I speak today as a person, Copsey Communications, not for any other organization, is that it's going to take us 5 to 10 years to get a serious density of Auracast hearing aid type devices. And to pursue this, I will be asking for some help from all of you at the end of the presentation. So from the point of view of T-coil, in my view, it has a minimum life of 5 to 10 years, and in many cases may have a much longer life. One of the advantages of Auracast is that we can plug into an existing loop system using the audio inputs and use Auracast on that site. So we have coverage of the new and the old, and hopefully, apart from one or two manufacturers who now produce the equipment, the others will slowly follow on. I would emphasize this issue that any equipment has to be qualified to the Bluetooth specifications, because others may not put in the standard speech, which means that hearing aids would not be able to pick up and translate the actual transmission into audio that they can understand. The other issue, which is very wide open at the moment, is how we select the streams. You'll all be familiar, I'm sure, with Wi-Fi, where your computer shows half a dozen different options, from free to someone's mobile phone. Well, we've got the same problem with Auracast. We need to have a device which allows the user to select the stream that they wish to use, and this is called an Auracast assistant. Currently, these can be to the specification, which has been published, I think, this week, and could be a mobile phone app. It could be smartphones. It could be a handheld device. It could be a range of things. However, the bad news is that these will be defined by the manufacturer of the transmitter. So unlike T-coil, we do not have a universal walk in and hear. A number of these things will undoubtedly slowly develop, because we are in very, very early days at the moment, and chips and other things are only just becoming available. The other issues which I haven't been able to find answers to are, if we look at things like education and big conference centers, we have multiple rooms. With the old VHF systems, we could go into the room and usually put our hearing aid or just tap on the wall, and the channel was set by universal system. That currently is missing from the Auracast abilities. It can use QR codes, but again, you then require a device, usually a mobile phone, to do that particular function. Many schools, religious organizations do not allow mobile phones. So this is a slight conundrum that we're going to have to come to terms with. And the issues which I would like everyone's help with is, we currently have regulation around the world. My prime interest is in Europe, and some countries have regulation, some do not. However, that regulation refers to normally T-coil only. I would request help from everyone on this call to start a process of where we, first of all, develop amongst ourselves input papers, perhaps starting with the European Commission level, in order to get regulation, including Auracast, as this activity will undoubtedly take 5+ years from previous experience. And by that time, Auracast should be a good density to be used by those with hearing loss. I'm particularly concerned with things like lifts and others, where Auracast could be extremely good. And give an example, with the number of streams, you could select a number of different languages. In the same way as an airport, you could select languages depending on, and also whether you wanted incoming data of flights, or whether you want to know whether you've missed your flight going out. So from that point of view, I will hand back to Lydia and request your thoughts on starting a system or a group to push both for T-coil and Auracast within the various administrations around the world. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Brian, for extensive discussion on what especially is happening in the field behind the doors related to Auracast. And I'm sure a lot of people have found it really interesting. And the chat room is basically just going and going, so there is a lot of interest. Our next speaker and who will be speaking is Mark Laureyns, who is the president of the European Association of Hearing Aids Professionals, and he comes from Belgium. And for interest of the time, I was not able to indicate that we could have a short break for tea or just to rest our eyes. So I apologize for that. And Mark, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Lydia, and thank you for the invitation. So I want to look at audiologist perspective and how we, together with the end users, see the potential of new systems developing. So Auracast, where are we now? Where will we go? The concept, the opportunities, and the challenges. And I agree, if you have listened to earlier talk, there are indeed some challenges. So we need to look at some aspects there. So let's have a look on where we are now and what is happening. First of all, when Bluetooth was developed, Bluetooth was not at all intended for speech and sound. Bluetooth was a communication system. It was in fact Ericsson starting with this already in 1989. The first ideas came, and then we have seen it appearing in Ericsson mobile phones and in IBM ThinkPad to connect your mouse and your keyboard and whatever. And of course, at that moment, there was an ability to have some sound transmission, but you must admit that if you're using a phone, most of the time people are not standing next to you. So delay and latency was not an issue at all. And that is what was the first generation and the first steps of Bluetooth up to 2001. And then there was a request coming, can't we use Bluetooth as a smart way to connect different devices, to program hearing aids, to connect hearing aids to other things? But the issue is that the Bluetooth system at that moment required so much energy. And you can imagine that hearing aids had quite small batteries. So if you had to use the old school Bluetooth system, it would have been a nightmare in function of battery consumption. And that is why they developed Bluetooth LE, low energy. Not to be confused by Bluetooth LE audio we're talking about today. It's a different system. So 2010, 2011, it started. And then Apple jumped on that train with Made for iPhone, which made it quite easy because you didn't need any interface. Your hearing aid could pick up right away a signal coming from an iPhone, iPad, and whatever. So I think that was a good way to lower the battery consumption. And then it took about 6 years until it was also ready for Android. But in those days, I can assure you, and that is still the case today, connecting your hearing aids to a smartphone is sometimes a piece of cake, but in many cases, a very difficult and complex cake that can be different any time of the year. Sometimes there's an update from your smartphone and then your hearing aid doesn't work anymore. So I think it was a kind of complex system, and it still is today. And now we move to a next step, and that is Bluetooth LE audio. Sorry for the confusion, but that's how Bluetooth has named it. And I think that is now a logical step towards much better sound quality for earbuds, for headphones, for sound systems, and also for hearing aids. So this is not developed for hearing aids only. This is developed for many different types of receiver. And the difference is also that now Bluetooth moves, instead of one-to-one communication, what was typically peer-to-peer. Now I think Bluetooth can also work towards broadcasting, right? Like a radio system. Now, maybe a little background. If you look at the latest version of Bluetooth sending sound to transceivers before LE audio came in place, the issue was that we had a fairly long delay. So first, Bluetooth would send your signal to your left receiver. That left receiver would then pick up a signal, send it to the right receiver. And you can imagine this all packing and unpacking takes time. And that explains the delay, and also explain why the sound quality wasn't all that great. The next step we have now with LE audio is that we have a much smarter system, sending directly to the two receivers at the same time, so much faster. They use also different codecs. I'll come to that in a second, right? And here you see, and I'm quite proud of that, a quality evaluation based on an ITU standard, by the way, that has systematically been evaluating how is the sound quality of the device. Now, the codec they use is called LC3, Low Complexity Communication Codec. It's just a smarter codec, and it allows to get the higher the bar, the better the sound quality. It allows to have a much better sound quality. Also, if your rate of your bit rate, if the number of information you have to send at the same time is much smaller. So it's kind of a win-win because it's faster, it has better sound quality. So that's kind of a good combination. And specifically for hearing aids, this is very interesting because we do have a limit on the amount of information we can handle because of the battery drain that would be caused. So is this only for Auracast? No. The new Bluetooth LE Audio gives you better performing Bluetooth audio products. So that's headphones, even loudspeakers, whatever receiver you're using. It's also indeed a good solution for better availability for Bluetooth for hearing aids and a much smarter system. So there's a new standardization. It has increased performance. It has global interoperability. I'm sorry that I'm not very good in complex words, but that's what they want me to use from time to time. And we hope that finally we could get rid of this nightmare of connecting all these different Bluetooth codecs and different systems with all your smartphones and your hearing aids. So that is the objective. And honestly, as an audiologist, I hope this works. It looks promising, but the proof of the pudding is in the eating. So let's see where this is leading to. But I think it would both the end users and the audiologists avoid a lot of nightmares and headaches to connect all of them together. And the last option it can do is also broadcast audio. So these shouldn't be confused. So Bluetooth LE Audio, it's a very good thing for using Bluetooth as we do it now for audio streaming and whatever, but it could also be interesting for broadcasting with some opportunities and also with some limitations, for sure. So yes, you typically know those silent screens, and they're kind of stupid because you know there is sound, and that sound could be directly streamed to anybody listening to the same television, because that's the good thing. It's sending one to all, and you can connect with your hearing aids, with your smartphone, with your headphones, with whatever you want to do. The same thing for a tour system, a tour guide. Sure, you don't need to have another device. You will have an Auracast transmitter, and you connect it right away. And you can connect to anything. So if you are a hearing aid user, you can connect it to your hearing aid. But if you have smart earbuds, you can do that as well. So anything can be connected. Multi-language support, and then you understand that there must be an interface. Because if you are at a conference and you can select 7 languages, well, you need to be able to select your language at that moment. And that's maybe a complexity. What is the interface you will use at that moment? Yes, when you look at the standard, there is an option that you can connect directly with the push of a button with your hearing aid to the Auracast signal. But imagine there are 7 different ones. You would need to scroll through all of them before you know where you are. So an interface device could be practical, but not always mandatory. And it's also intended for augmented and assistive listening to make it easier for people that use ALDs to connect better, to understand better, and to function better in each environment. I heard a lot of discussion right now, and I saw them on the chat as well, on the processing delay, delays you are getting. For your information, delays can sometimes be something you want to get, because if you are at the concert and you're sitting quite far from the stage, the sound takes a while before it arrives at your ears. Now, mostly we think that we are listening directly to the source only, but many people using hearing aids have good low frequency hearing, so they will hear the low frequencies directly with their ears, and they will hear the amplified high frequencies with their hearing aids. And then the smart thing about Auracast now, and that's in development, they can see where you are picking up the Auracast signal, and that signal will be delayed as such, so your direct sound and the amplified sound through Auracast will have the same delay, which would lead to better sound quality. Interesting that sometimes more delay can be an option. And what you see in this room, yes, it's not only hearing aid users, it's also people with cochlear implants, but it's also people with earbuds and whatever using it. So if you look at this, this is a graph and a sign that's coming in fact from the standard in development. On the one hand, you have an advertisement. So we have an interface, they call it an assistant, as Brian explained. This could be a watch, it can be a smartphone, it could be anything else that has some kind of screen and some visual, where you could select which kind of Auracast signal you want to use at that moment if more Auracast signals are available. And then there is direct transmission, left and right, separated directly to the receivers, meaning directly through your hearing aid. So it's not that the Auracast signal is first sending that to your smartphone and your smartphone is sending that to your hearing aid. No, that is just an interface to select it. It should go direct. And that's also intended to reduce delays and to get better sound quality. That's their intention at that moment. So where are we now? Well, there are many Bluetooth transmitters that are already available today. But interestingly, there's a lot of other options. You can connect a dongle or whatever to an existing transmitter. And I follow Brian 100%. As long as the rollout of Bluetooth receiver, Auracast receivers isn't fully available, the best solution would be that you have your teleloop system available. So you have your loop there in your room and your transmitter is there. And you just connect this dongle or something else to make sure that at the same time you transmit the Auracast signal and you make sure that the telecall is available. And then you don't need to worry. And that should go quite fast and easy. So backwards compatibility for all the transmission systems, that is not a big deal. That can be handled. And now instead of Apple jumping on the first train of Bluetooth LE, now we see that Samsung is jumping on the first train of Bluetooth LE audio. So they have already implemented it in all their smartphones and all their smart televisions and all their computers. It's already there. But don't worry, you can connect it to an existing Windows computer or whatever just by using a USB stick that can make that device already directly Auracast compatible. And then, of course, you need receivers. And of course, you wouldn't be surprised that also Samsung, their first receivers, their smart earbuds are already compliant for Auracast, but more and more are coming. And then more and more hearing aids are coming, being Bluetooth compatible. I'll talk, Auracast compatible. I'll talk about it in a second. Now, you may see that one brand is missing. And the brand missing today is Apple. And it's kind of surprising. We have already asked Apple many times, when will you come? They all say that, in fact, they should be compatible if they give an iOS update. So far, we didn't see it happening. But that's, of course, one of the things that could make a difference at some point. Looking at hearing aids, you see that GN, ReSound, Jabra, and Beltone, they are already enabled. So Auracast is enabled. You can already connect to an Auracast signal with those devices. So that seems to be working quite well. We see that Signia is what they call prepared for Auracast. So Auracast ready. So they need a firmware update and then you can use it. The same thing goes for Oticon. They also are now prepared. So I think it's ready, but it's not activated yet. And that's what you could find. The latest information I got is that ReSound, Beltone, Jabra, they have it ready. Then it's already available. In Oticon Signa, it's enabled. It's ready, so it needs to be activated. But also goes for Philips hearing aids, Rexton hearing aids, Hero OTC, and also Nucleus from Cochlear, the Nucleus 8, should also be Auracast ready. So it is available at some point. They just need to activate it. And yes, there are some brands missing. And that's what we need to be aware about, that it will take some time before it's fully rolled out. So there are more and more streamers coming, transmitters coming, there are more and more devices coming, there are more and more systems coming. They project there will be loads of systems coming in the future, fully agree. You see there's a lot of people and a lot of companies in this whole project that are part of it. So that's cool. And then we heard people saying, is there a standard, yes or no? And yes, there is an IEC standard in development for Auracast. It's called IEC 10118/17. They couldn't call it the Auracast standard because that is not allowed by IEC, because Auracast is seen as a more commercial name. So it has a more complex name, Assistive Listening System for hearing aid users based on 2.4 gigahertz audio streaming. Not the most sexy name ever, but that is hardly the case for standards. And there's a lot of things they're looking into: verification of the performance, transmitter requirements, hearing aid requirements. I just looked at the latest version of the standard in development right now, and I think a lot of things you were discussing are already kind of in preparation, looking at what it could do, like defining the maximum delay you should get, what is the energy signal, what is the sound quality you need to be able to do this right. So yes, does it mean that we should kill the telecoil? Looking at Lydia's face, I don't think that's what we should do. I think we know very well that for the users that wouldn't be acceptable. We also need to be aware that telecoils are a very good solution in countries where teleloops are readily available and are working. And we should promote that more to make them more popular. But that will be the same concern we will have for Auracast and others. If the transmitters aren't working right, people can't benefit. Yes, I think there's a lot of communication about it. I think you all know that Juliette Sterkers, she's the teleloop promoter and ambassador at some point. She has a recent TED talk, which was very good, looking into that. So no, we should not kill the telecoil. Is the telecoil better than Auracast, or is Auracast much better than the telecoil? Well, they all have their ups and downs, and I think we got a very good overview in the first talk. What I know is that we as audiologists have to join forces with all of you. I think we should do this together. If you talk about person-centered hearing care, this is about looking at your specific needs. And if the need of our user is to be able to use a telecoil, or if the need is to be able to function in specific environments, and we have to inform the user that the T-coil is an option, of course we need to do that. There is no discussion about that, and that's why we need to join forces. Sometimes I hear we have to convince the manufacturer to put telecoils in their hearing aids. Sorry for that, but if the users want it and the hearing aid professionals and audiologists want it, they are commercial companies. They will make sure it's there. So yes, we know there's a concern from EFHOH and IHLMA, and if you look at the Budapest Declaration from 2022, it's very clear. They are concerned that telecoils and hearing aids will disappear before Auracast is fully rolled out and available in all hearing aids. We agree. We do understand that concern, and we fully support your declaration. And we also need to be realistic that it will take at least 8 years. And I think Brian already said between 5 and 10 years. So let's maybe round it off that at least for 10 years now, they need to go hand in hand. We need to support all. They should be there in regulations, requirements, whatever. And we have to join forces to promote it in the right way. Conclusion, Bluetooth is old. There are new things coming, LE audio, and they're not the same. Sorry for the confusion. Sound quality should be better with LE audio compared to the other one. Auracast is a broadcasting signal that can transmit to many different devices, so not only hearing aids. It can be used for silent screens, tour systems, multi-language support, assistive listening. And yes, available Auracast transmitters and compliant device receivers and earbuds and even hearing aids are increasing rapidly, but be aware that the receiver is not backwards compatible. So if you have a hearing aid today that is not ready for Auracast, you can't make it compatible tomorrow. And that is something to be realistic about. The standard is in development, and no, we should not kill the telecoil. We should join forces to be sure it's all there. Thank you for your attention. I also want to thank Nikolai Bisgar from EHLMA, was my former boss, by the way, for all the support and he gave and all the extra information to make sure I wasn't talking nonsense today. And I hope you all agree that it was hopefully correct, at least to the best of my knowledge. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Mark, for comprehensive overview and what is your role as the audiologist and every audiologist who works with us. Thank you very much for your continued support and working with us. Now our next speaker is our own Alf Lindberg, who is coming from Sweden and who is our board member and also the accessibility specialist working in standards and so on. Himself also self-advocates. So Alf, floor is yours.
Well, thank you, Lydia. And I must say thank you to all the previous speakers today. A lot of knowledge have been shared very promptly to us all. And it's up to us to make use of this. To start, I would like to say that we do have some problems to deal with. We are now today talking about assistive listening systems and the induction loop system that's been around for a long time, and the Auracast system then that is coming on very new now. But to make these systems usable in different countries, we also need to have we also need to have the legislation, and we know that this differs very much in the different countries. So the level of presence of assistive listening systems is very different in different countries. We had the example from Poland. Thank you very much for that. And it's an impressive work that has been done in Poland over a few years to raise the number of assistive listening systems. Much of the focus has been on the new technology of the and the upcoming Auracast, and we do know that this is a very promising system. I think most of us already today use Bluetooth in one way or another, and especially when connecting between the hearing aids and the mobile phone, and it's a very good instrument to use. And if the Auracast system will work as good as promised, this will, of course, be a very big step forward. And as Mark very eloquent has showed us, it has great promises. But we must not do the mistake that has been done sometimes earlier when there's new technology coming in, that we dismiss the old one that is there. We have to be able to make technologies coexisting. And if you compare to the electrical cars, just because we are a lot of electrical cars available today, we don't stop using the old fossil fuel cars. They are running in the same lanes. They are in the same households sometimes. And that's the way we have to deal with the induction loop and the Auracast system. They have to coexist and very slowly work together. And like Mark also showed us, the Budapest Declaration is a very important declaration to always point at from our side, from EFHOH and IHLMA, and all our member organizations should point to this, that these two declarations, these two assistive listening systems must exist together. Well, it was the former slide, but okay, this one you can see here, and this declaration, if you want to read it, it's available on the International Federation of Hard of Hearing, their web, and also to EFHOH, and you will also get it through when we share the material from this webinar. Okay, then next slide. The one thing then that is needed, apart from then a national legislation that supports the use of assistive listening system, it's international standardization. And we need standardization both for the technical systems, but also for the built environment. And there's a relatively new European standard called then the EN 17210, which you can see on the slide here, that is now also under a small revision because it has a connection to the new legislation coming up next year that is based on the directive of the European Accessibility Act. But in this standard, there is some important features, and they are about the importance of good acoustics and on assistive listening systems, and also on alarms. And when it comes to the assistive listening systems in this standard, it mostly often points using the induction loop as an example, because the induction loop is the existing system we have today. You must remember that the induction loop is there. Like someone said, we have millions of installations all over the place, all over the world, in many countries, and there are still new installations done. And so we have to remind this is the existing listening system that we can connect to, and it has great advantages. The greatest one we today know is that if you have a T-coil in your hearing aid, which most persons have, then you decide yourself if you are in a room where the T sign is, then just push a button on your hearing aid and you will be connected. And it's very good, mostly if the installation is correct. Auracast is something that is coming, but it's a bit in the future, and I am not as optimistic as the sort of marketing personnel in different companies who say that this will be here and there and there. We all know that new technology is slow coming out to us all, and especially slow coming out in systems where you need public financing to make them available. And in most countries in Europe, we have some kind of public financing of our hearing aids, and we know that it is 5 or 6 or 7 years between the possibility you have to get a new pair of hearing aids. So if I have my hearing aids today, maybe my next hearing aids will not be Auracast ready, and then it will be another year, another 4, 5, 6 years to come before I have Auracast ready hearing aids. So to take the next slide here, I would say a few words about the importance of advocacy to get good enforcement of the right for assistive listening systems. We had the example from Poland, and I will give an example from Sweden. This text you see here today, before you now, it's in Swedish, and I guess most of you can't read this, so we will go on to the next slide then, which is translated automatically by Microsoft. But this is was a brand new legislation in Sweden on assistive listening systems. And in the first row of this legislation, it was only the wording in black we have here that you can see that was included. There was not a single word about assistive listening systems. And it had been deleted from all legislation because there had been a pressure on politicians and governments and so on to make the building regulations more simple. So they simply just deleted everything about assistive listening systems. So that is when the Swedish Organization for Hard of Hearing, together with also one company, we joined forces and we made a very strong lobbying effort to get a new writing into the legislation. And now we have this one. This is marked in yellow here, which I think is extremely good. And it also is non-technological. So it means that it says that in assembly halls and receptions, that includes meeting rooms, lecture rooms, and so on, systems for sound transmission directly to hearing aids, and also in Swedish it said hearing assistive equipment, so it includes hearing aids and cochlear implants must be in place so that accessibility and usability for people with hearing impairments can be achieved. This is a very good writing, and I think this could be or should be included if you have the possibility in the national laws. This is a very good writing. I mean, with just this, the direct transmission from the sound source to the hearing aids. I think that is important because we have other kind of systems which which are indirect. But this is the direct systems, which sort of excludes those things like don't work like the Wi-Fi systems because they have too much latency. As the time is running, I will stop there and leave the floor to Lydia for eventual questions. Okay, Lydia, you're muted.
Now I am muted. Thank you very much, Alf, for your presentation and presenting not just the Swedish perspective, but also the European Federation of Hard of Hearing People perspective. We have a lot of discussions between the board, but also with our members. We have a lot of discussions as well with Mark Laureyns and his members too. So these discussions are ongoing and they are not going to stop right now at this moment. We're going to stop because the webinar is stopping. However, this particular webinar is stopping today. We will have another webinar this autumn when we will allow for further discussions on accessibility of systems, on advocacy and tips for advocacy, which Alf will again provide you more with information and his colleagues. Today, I need to finish our webinar. Unfortunately, we do not have time for any more questions, but we do have, or do we have the time? No, we don't. We have already run out of time. It's now 4:30. Do we have a time actually? Am I correct that we don't have a time?
No.
Thank you very much, Daria. So unfortunately for this, yeah, I'm just checking because I'm on London time and there is a Brussels time. So I really apologize if anyone wanted to have a questions and answers, but from my perspective, I've seen the chat going really quite lively. So I think there were lots of discussions and any questions were answered. If not, we will save the chat and we will get back to you. In the meantime, I would like to thank everybody, especially the speakers, for sharing their extensive knowledge with everyone, because that's what's the most important thing, isn't it? Knowledge is our power. And we need to have the knowledge to be able to empower ourselves. I would like to also thank our wonderful captioner who worked so hard today and who made sure that the event is accessible to everyone. So thank you very much for your help today, Alison. And I would like to mention that we have another webinar, which is on 19th of September. And Alf will also be there. This time Alf will moderate. And that will be related to European Accessibility Act, which is coming next year. And we will discuss the hard of hearing perspective on that act. We have also great speakers lineup, so do join us if you haven't joined and check our website for the event registration. So without further ado, thank you very much to everyone and thank you to the speakers, and we will be in touch again. Thank you. Bye-bye.